the 1850s, Northerners and Southerners of the United States were divided over the question of slavery and became increasingly polarized. In 1859, more than 3.5 million slaves labored in Southern states, which made up more than 47% of the entire population. Slavery was profitable, and although some other nations had ended it, there was no sight it was ending in the United States. Many Northerners had opposed the spread of slavery into new U.S. territories, and some wanted to abolish it altogether. Abolitionist sentiment ran strong in the new Republican Party. The Southerners feared for the future of their institution if the Republicans gained power. The United States was on the brink of civil war. On April 12, 1861, the first shots of America's bloodiest war were fired by Confederate soldiers at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. The 4 years that followed would become the single most influential event in our nation's history. Even today, the Civil War remains our country's greatest trial. The key decisions made, leading up to, and included in the Battle of Gettysburg directly impacted the outcome of the Civil War, which allowed a reformed nation to put an end to slavery. On April 22, 1861, only 10 days after the war's inception, one of the war's most influential and controversial leaders, Robert E. Lee, was named commander of the Virginia Confederate Forces. For the following 2 years, Confederate forces led by Lee controlled the area of northern Virginia. In late June of 1863, despite having a stronghold in the South, Lee made a pivotal decision to push his troops north into Union-controlled territory. Lee felt that going on the offensive and going right at the Union troops could be the key to winning the war. This decision proved to be the single most important decision of the Civil War. On July 1, 1863, day one of the battle, Lee and his principal subordinate, General James Longstreet, disagreed on strategy of drawing the Union Army towards them. If Lee had listened to Longstreet, the battle would have taken a whole different direction, and in turn, the Civil War itself. In your opinion, what was the most important decision, made or not made, that was decided the Battle of Gettysburg?
I would say the most important decision that was not made was by Lee himself on the first day. He actually had the men and materials to overtake the Union line. The Union only had a few troops there at Gettysburg. They hadn't even occupied Cemetery Hill on the first day, but Lee was very cautious. And since his cavalry commander, Stuart, wasn't back in camp, he was hesitant, and he didn't think he should push forward to overtake the Federals. He called the Federal Army. And if he had, the Battle of Gettysburg would have been over on the first day, because he had all the men he needed to finish the battle.
It has been reported that Lee and Longstreet disagreed on some of the tactics to be taken. Who do you feel was right?
I actually feel that Longstreet was correct, because he was a defensive commander, and he saw that it was a mile of open ground, and his men, his fellow soldiers, were going to be fired at from actually 180 degrees around, from the hill, from the front, from the left, and they had no chance.
By day 2 of the battle, Lee and his troops became confused and indecisive on how to proceed. On July 3rd, the final day of the battle, General George Meade, commander of the Union Army, makes his pivotal decision to stay put and wait for Lee to attack.
In hindsight, Meade, the commander of the Union forces, by just being conservative and waiting for Lee to attack, because he knew he had the high ground, was the strategy that prevailed.
The turning point of the Battle of Gettysburg took place on Day 3 during Pickett's charge. What do you feel was the turning point in the Battle of Gettysburg?
The turning point definitely was on the third day, Pickett's charge. Lee's decision to move forward with the attack against Longstreet's opinion is called the high tide of the Confederacy, or the high water mark of the Confederacy. You know, either terms fit. And the soldiers attacked in mass, in lines, and they were devastated. And that destroyed Lee's army, destroyed the way of fighting, destroyed morale. From then on, it was certain that the Confederates were going to lose the war.
The Battle of Gettysburg ended on July 3, 1863, when James Richmond of the 8th Ohio Infantry of the Union Army captured the Confederate flag. 4 months later, President Abraham Lincoln delivered the famous Gettysburg Address at the National Cemetery in Gettysburg.
Hello, my name is Matt Atkinson. I'm a park ranger at Gettysburg National Military Park. If the outcome of the battle was different, do I feel that slavery would have prevailed in our country? If the Battle of Gettysburg meant the winning of Southern independence, then I agree with that. Slavery would have prevailed in the country. However, it would have been two countries. If you believe that a Southern victory here at Gettysburg would have resulted in their independence, then the South would have remained with slaves. However, they would have been a separate country. And now, what would have happened to slavery is hypothetical. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution and machinery coming apart, the South would have a large problem on their hands because they wouldn't need as many slaves as they had at the time. So I don't know exactly what Southerners would have done over the next 50 years. Now, as far as Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, he spoke toward slavery, I think. He spoke toward the Union and slavery at the same time. He wrote, "It is for us the living rather to be dedicated now to the unfinished work which they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth."
On December 6, 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, the abolition of slavery. The war was over, slavery was abolished, and a reformed United States entered into a new birth of freedom, the land of the free and home of the brave.